Ac mae'r siaradwr nesaf yn cynrychioli Plantlife yn arbenigwr, neu'n uwch arbenigwr cen. And that's what's so good about today. So many different people of all walks of life are here, and I think that's so important for Coexist, that it's that you're open to so many ideas from all walks of life, and it's so important. Felly, yn siaradwr nesaf ni, fel o'n i dweud, yn uwch arbenigwr cen gyda Plantlife. Yr enw iawn swyddogol ydy Dave Lamacraft, but I think people know you as well as Dave Chuff. Is that right? Please give him a warm welcome. Diolch. Diolch, Dave.
Is that working? Will that work?
Yeah.
Playing something? Okay, diolch Emily. Hi everyone, I think I might be the first speaker that's not from Coed. Breaking out to Coed after. Yeah, whatever. So yeah, I work for a charity called Plantlife, with the global voice for plants and fungi. And my job is about lichens and bryophytes. I'm a senior specialist in lichens and bryophytes. Lichens I'm going to talk about in a minute. Bryophytes are mosses, liverworts and hornworts. But basically my work is all about really small plants and fungi. Lichens have actually had featured quite highly already, thanks to Junko's talk. So hopefully I'll be carrying on seeing there, tell you a bit more about them. So lichens, trees and people. So I'm going to weave how people have interacted with trees and lichens through the whole talk. So to start with, what is a lichen? So lichens are basically fungi. Fungi can produce their own food. They have to partner up with something else to get their food. So in many cases that's decaying wood or decaying vegetation. Some parasitise insects, so things like the zombie fungi that take over spiders. In the case of lichens, they partner up with an alga or a cyanobacteria. So it's a mutualism of symbiosis. So mutual benefits for both partners. In this diagram here, photograph here, see basically you've got sort of fungal material, a skin of fungal stuff on the top, and a layer of green underneath, which is where the algal cells are. So they're like little peas wrapped in kind of fungal material, and underneath you've got kind of loose fungal stuff here, and then they have these structures on the bottom, which look like roots. They're not roots, so that the lichens use the algae to get their food. So the algae photosynthesize, and the fungi is able to absorb the food that the algae creates. So that's what the fungus gets from the algae. In return, the algae gets protection from things like UV light and grazing by snails and things like that. So in return, so that's why it's a mutualism. First discovered by a Swiss biologist called Schwendener in the late 19th century. So essentially they come in body coexistence. You know, that since Schwendener did his work, we've discovered that it's a much more complex relationship. And there's actually other species of fungi in the mix as well, yeasts and also bacteria. So there's a whole complex of organisms going on inside what we know of as one organism, essentially, as a lichen. The way these fungi and algae interact produces this kind of multitude of different forms and colours and patterns. This is just a small section of a fence on a cliff top. You can kind of see the variety of form that you get by the way these kind of algae and fungi interact. Every lichen is a different fungal species, but they only share a small number of algal species, so it's quite kind of random the way well, it's not random, but the way that they interact creates all these different forms. So you get bushy ones, you get kind of leafy ones, shrubby ones, ones that even emulate little mushrooms. That's got a rare species that grows up on the top here on the heathland up behind the plas. This is audience interaction part, so feel free to interact anyone. If you can spot the odd and out between quail's eggs, fruit fly, David Bowie's Space Oddity, a lichen, and a tardigrade. You've all had coffee, okay? So you should. There's no excuse to, you're not falling asleep. Come on, someone's got to guess.
Can I guess and just give a reason? Quail's eggs.
Why?
What's that?
It's a guess. No. Why the tardigrade?
Because it just exists without being in symbiosis.
That's
one
it.
of the pictures.
The other man is David Bowie's Space Oddity. Because he's a rock star and the others aren't. So David Bowie, as far as I know, hasn't been into space, and nor is his album. But all the others have been into space. In the case of a lichen, this picture is a good example really of how lichens pattern our world. So certainly around here, where the air is really clean, most surfaces are covered in lichens, rock surfaces, walls, trees, and they kind of go unnoticed. Certainly with tree bark, you show people a tree and say, oh, that's all lichens. They often say, oh, I thought that was just bark, but you look closely that lichens pattern our world, basically. Anyway, this yellow one here is called the Mac lichen, or now known as the space lichen, because that's one of several species that were sent up into space, structured outside of the International Space Station for several weeks, and brought back down to Earth as a kind of experiment to see kind of what happened to them. And basically they kind of just picked up where they left off. Being in space for a month didn't really affect them, they just shut down. So in terms of that symbiosis, the fungus is able to protect that algae from really extreme UV radiation, and from basically it protects it from that drying out as well. So they hydrate when they come back to Earth and start photosynthesizing again, so they can survive really extreme environments. So they're known as extremophiles. They're found in all the most extreme environments on Earth. In the case of this one, it's found in Antarctica, so they're found in the poles. They're found in deserts. This one carpets open deserts in Namibia. Tops of mountains, the Alps, Himalayas, and found in the seashores as well, in the intertidal zones. So, picture on the left there, that's already blob with the black dots is a lichen that grows in these tidal zones. So it can survive inundation by salt water twice a day. If you look really closely on the barnacles, barnacles here, these are black dots. They're another type of lichen that's evolved to grow on barnacles. So these things can survive saltwater inundation on a regular basis, which would be toxic to those kind of plant species. Not just natural environments, but they're happy in extreme urban environments too, like pavements and roads, fast bars and Tesco's car park, and a friend's old sandals in their garden. So they just adapted to kind of cope with really extreme environments. The reason for this is because they contain loads of chemicals, so there are hundreds of chemicals within the body of a lichen that you don't find anywhere else in nature. This is the reason why we've used them for dyeing for centuries, and used them as wound dressings for centuries as well. So it's because of the chemicals they contain. In the case of this yellow one here, so this is a really common lichen you see all over the place, especially in urban environments, the maritime sunburst lichen. The yellow colour of that is a chemical called paratin, which is a UV sunscreen, essentially. So that protects the rest of the lichen and the algae inside it, importantly, from the UV radiation. And they can switch it on and off, so when you find that in the shade, it's like a grey-blue colour, which is actually similar to the colour it is when you use it as a dye. And also actually recently that's been found to be really successful in treating human cancers. So I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of what these kind of chemicals can be used for. Come on, work. Oh, So, as an example of the kind of chemicals, so for identifying lichens, there's about 2,000 species in Britain. A lot of them look really similar, and you kind of need to use chemistry to identify them. This looks like essentially just a bit of a holly tree, holly bark. When you shine UV light on it, it shows up the lichen that was there pretty much hidden. So the yellow that you see there are the fruiting bodies of the lichen, so they're the bits where the spores are. And they're covered in like a little dusting, and that dusting reacts bright yellow to UV light. And inside the lichen, this is a cross section at about 400 times magnification through a fruiting body of a lichen. So that this bit up here is where the spores are sitting. There are 3 little fruiting bodies in a row there. This grows immersed in bark cells on tree trunks, so that's the bark cells there. Then you've got the algae and fungal stuff underneath. That's the spores at about 600 times magnification. They're about 25 microns, so 0.025 millimetre long, and they're held in these sort of sacs. The sacs are in those structures I just showed you, and they come under quite extreme pressures. The sacs burst and the spores are fired out, of course. So chemistry again, this one, so chemistry is used in identifying them. You use certain chemicals to flush through the lichen, and in the case of that one it goes bright purple. And then sometimes the chemicals are in the form of crystals, which you can see when you use polarised light under a microscope. These are just taken with my phone and a microscope, so they're not great quality, but when you actually see it in the flesh, it's quite spectacular. So one of the things that got me kind of interested, I've only really been looking at lichens for 10 years or so, 10, 12 years. I was doing bird stuff before that. But one of the things that got me hooked on lichens is partly everything I've just been showing you, like how amazing they are, but also about what they tell you about the landscape. So you can read a lot about not just the ecological aspects of landscape, but the historical and our interaction with the landscape as well. So this is a really classic example, a coastal cliff where you have these kind of coloured bandings on the cliff. So this is low tide, so you've got barnacles and limpets standing in this grey brown bit, and this black stripe here is basically made up of the lichen, family of lichens called tar lichens, which are these sort of big black crusty things. These can survive regular inundation by seawater, so they grow in the intertidal zones. And above that you've got an orange zone up here, which is dominated by orange and yellow lichens, like the one we've just seen. And then you've got a grey zone up here, which stuff that basically doesn't really like seawater at all, salt spray. But the orange zone, they don't like regular inundation by seawater, but they can cope with sea spray, and they can cope with the nutrients that come with that, which then gives us indications about what's going on in our environment more widely. So you start this lichen, the yellow one, the Xanthoria, the maritime sunburst lichen, has become quite common in Britain, and you'll often see hedges with bright yellow twigs, especially in more urban environments. That's a change that's been happening over the last 20 or 30 years, and that's a change in response to nitrogen pollution. So, to all intents and purposes, we're not aware of these kind of pollutants happening, but we can use lichens as biomonitors, as bioindicators to tell us what's happening to our environment. Basically what happens is, because the orange lichen can cope with these really high levels of nutrients, other species can't, so it just outcompetes them. You get a complete change in the lichen communities on the twigs. Similarly, this one here, this lichen in the middle, can cope with quite high levels of nutrients as well. And it's a classic species of what's known as dogweed zone on the tree. Particularly in urban environments. So this lichen is adapted to these high levels of nutrients again, and it can survive in the zone of the tree that gets weed on by dogs a lot. Now, a lichenologist colleague who lives in an old house found this lichen growing outside on a wall below a window. Yeah. And she couldn't quite work out where that was, and then with a bit of investigation she discovered that that's the window that we used to empty the chamber pot out of. So this particular lichen is a great indicator of urine. Should that become useful?
Useful.
Lichens and trees. So Britain has a lot of ancient trees still. We've got more ancient trees than most of the rest of Europe, certainly northwest Europe. So this is a site down in Buckinghamshire called Burning Beeches. It's what's known as a wood pasture, so it's both woodland and pasture. See how open it is amongst these big old trees. The picture on the left is an engraving from the 19th century. 19th century. And the photo on the right is a photo I took a couple of years ago. I wasn't trying to match up the two. It's just complete coincidence that I took that photo I did and found that engraving, but it really matches really closely this kind of line of ancient paarded beach. So we know that landscape has been kind of the same for at least 100 years. But trees like this are going to be about 500 years old, so possibly older. So we know that landscape has been pretty much the same for 600 years or more. And that's really important for a whole load of lichens that are really specialist. So rare lichens are generally rare because they have really particular niches. They can't grow on any old tree, they have really particular requirements for the chemistry of the bark and moisture and light and things like that. And this species here, the beech marble lichen, is only known in two areas in Britain. One is the Burning Beeches, and the other is the New Forest, which is the other main big old beech wood pasture that we have in Britain. So and it's only there because of this continuity, the fact that this habitat, these trees have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is one of my favourite old tree sites down in the north coast of Exmoor. And these old trees, oaks especially, have this community of lichens, which probably aren't the most spectacular things in nature, but they're kind of subtly beautiful. They form these mosaics of crusty different colours and textures on the lower trunks of oak trees. So this community takes about 300 years to grow. I mean, it only colonises trees that are 300 years or more old. So it gives you an indication that there's been this continuity of habitat, this continuity of old trees on this site for centuries and centuries. I can't really talk about lichens and trees in Britain without talking about our temperate rainforest. So this has only really it's been getting a lot of attention in the last few years, but it's obviously been there a long time, but it's finally getting recognised as being really special. That's the global distribution of temperate rainforest in the globe. It's basically Pacific Northwest, Southern South America, down in southern Australasia, a few bits in Japan and Himalayas, Middle East, and then Britain and Ireland up here. So globally really rare, way more rare than tropical rainforest. And it's a really spectacular habitat for lichens. So species like the tree lungwort lichen, the red discs there are the fruiting bodies, that's what's producing the spores. The tailed leaf lichen, this species only reproduces by bits falling off, so in terms of that continuity of habitat, it can't get to new sites really easily, so you need that continuity. It's an old growth woodland species. Lead-fruited felt lichen, red-eyed shingle lichen, tree flute. We'll call that one knobbery felt lichen. Lichens don't have common names, really, so you can just make them up and get away with it. We'll call this one barnacle, well, it's his name is the barnacle lichen. And the green satin lichen or dragon skin. So these are all species of old growth woodlands and old growth temperate rainforest in particular. So you can tell a lot about the history of a woodland, temperate rainforest site when you go into it by looking at what lichens are there. If you're seeing these species, then you're in an old site, a site that's been similar to that for hundreds and hundreds of years. They probably actually go back as far as the wildwood, it's probably thousands of years that they've been growing in the Welsh temperate rainforest. They get you'll go into some woods and you just don't see these species. Well, they might be onto the boundary trees, the old trees around the edge, and that's usually a sign that the wood's been quite heavily disturbed at some time in the past. And through the 18th and 19th centuries, our woods were really industrial. We had you'd be quite shocked about how industrial our woods were for a period of time, with the kind of coppicing and bark tanning industries and things like that. And that interrupts that continuity of habitat, and that you can tell a lot by looking at where the lichens are and what lichens are there. You can also kind of tell a lot about a tree. So the idea of the architecture of the tree was new to me when I started looking at lichens. But the way that trees form, especially in the canopy, that affects the way water flows down and what species grow where, gets quite interesting. And so this idea that lichens tell us a lot about the landscape, a lot about the landscape history, is one of the things that really gets me interested in lichens. But I found this the other day when I was doing prep for this talk, and this says it much more eloquently than I could. If you've always wanted to learn how to read a landscape, lichens are like words on a page. They can tell you about climate, about air quality, habitat dynamics. Lichens are storytellers, speakers of the stones, speakers of the forests, speakers of the desert soils, and climate and time. That's written by Mr. Noel, who's a lichenologist and artist. That's it.
You must be in the middle of the picture.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah.